history conceals its most disturbing truths beneath layers of dust and silence. Empires built on blood, plagues that devoured civilizations, mysteries that refuse to stay buried. This is Grimoryx. If you're willing to descend into the shadows with us, subscribe now. The year is 48 AD. Somewhere in the marble corridors of the imperial palace, an emperor sleeps unaware. His wife, dressed not in silk but in rags, slips through a hidden passage like a ghost fleeing its own tomb. A cheap blonde wig hides her dark hair. No jewelry, no cosmetics, nothing that would betray her rank. Just coarse, stained fabric that reeks of the streets. She moves quickly, head low, through alleys slick with filth and shadow. Her destination, the Suburra, Rome's festering underbelly. A district where criminals vanish into crumbling tenements, where sickness clings to the walls, where desperation is currency, and where the cheapest brothels wait with open doors. She enters one of them. The madam recognizes her instantly despite the disguise. They all know, they always have. But here she goes by another name. Lysiska, the she-wolf, because this woman, sneaking through Rome's most wretched corners to sell herself, is Valeria Messalina, Empress of Rome, the most powerful woman on earth, and what she's about to do will echo through 2,000 years of history. But to understand that night, you must first understand her. Messalina was born around 20 AD into bloodlines most Romans could only dream of. Her ancestry traced directly back to Augustus, the empire's first ruler. This wasn't privilege, this was proximity to the gods themselves. Wealth, beauty, education, status. Ancient texts describe her as luminous, pale skin, golden hair, features so aristocratic they seemed carved from legend. At 17, she was wed to Claudius, a man more than 30 years her senior. At the time, he was no emperor, he was a punchline. A limping, stuttering embarrassment to his own bloodline. He drooled, he trembled. Rome's elite whispered that he was weak, incompetent, disposable, but his blood was imperial and so was hers. The marriage was strategy, not romance, two branches of power quietly entwined. Then in 41 AD, everything shattered. Emperor Caligula, madman, tyrant, self-proclaimed god, was butchered by his own guards in a dark passage beneath the palace. 4 years of terror ended in moments. Caligula had declared himself divine, violated his sisters publicly, appointed his horse to the Senate, executed citizens for sport. The Praetorian Guard had endured enough. They struck, and suddenly Rome had no ruler. Chaos loomed. Civil war, Senate coups, military factions circling like wolves. The Praetorian Guard tore through the palace searching for anyone with imperial blood. They found Claudius hiding behind a curtain, trembling, certain he would be the next corpse. Instead, they dragged him into the light and crowned him emperor. It was absurd. Claudius had been mocked his entire life, dismissed, hidden away like something shameful. But he was the last living adult male descendant of Augustus, so they made him god-king of the known world. And Messalina, barely 21, became empress overnight. Imagine that transformation. One moment you're the wife of a forgotten joke. The next you command legions. Slaves by the thousands, palaces, gardens, gold, silk, the finest wines, the richest feasts. You hold the power to elevate families or erase them. And you've given birth to Britannicus, your husband's son, the future emperor. Your bloodline will rule for generations. Most women would have stopped there. Security, legacy, immortality. But Messalina, she had only just begun. The historians Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Elder, Juvenal, they all wrote of her. And what they recorded still shocks us today. According to their accounts, Messalina possessed an appetite that defied comprehension. She didn't merely take lovers, she weaponized desire. She identified men, powerful men, married men, senators, commanders, and she claimed them. But this wasn't seduction, it was dominance. Refusal wasn't an option. If a man turned her away, he might be accused of treason, stripped of rank, found dead in an alley, so they obeyed, they had no choice. The empress desired them and survival meant submission. She pursued everyone, military leaders, politicians. Even actors, performers, Romans considered barely human, hardly better than slaves. One actor, Nestor, tried to resist. So Messalina went to Claudius himself and demanded the emperor command Nestor to serve her in all things. Claudius, oblivious or indifferent, agreed. So by imperial decree, Nestor was legally obligated to sleep with the empress. Madness disguised as law, but her appetite stretched far beyond the palace walls. The poet Juvenal wrote of her secret life. How she would wait until Claudius drifted into sleep, then slip into the night dressed as a common prostitute. She would walk to the Subura, to its filthiest brothels, and work under the name Lysiska, the she-wolf. Standing in doorways, nipples painted gold, calling out to strangers. Servicing men until dawn broke. And even then, Juvenal claimed she was never satisfied. This sounds impossible, doesn't it? Too grotesque to be real. And you're right to doubt. Juvenal was a satirist. He exaggerated to provoke. But here's the unsettling part: multiple sources tell similar stories. And one account in particular refuses to fade. Pliny the Elder, a scholar, not a poet, recorded it as fact. According to Pliny, Messalina decided to settle a question. Who possessed greater endurance, an empress or a professional prostitute? So she challenged Sylla, one of Rome's most famous courtesans, to a contest. The rules were simple: 24 hours. As many men as each woman could endure, whoever lasted longest won. This wasn't done in secret. Roman nobles watched, witnesses, an audience. The contest began. Sylla, a professional who understood pacing, worked steadily through the night. By dawn, she had serviced 25 men. Exhausted, broken, she could go no further. Messalina kept going, past 25, past 30. Some sources suggest higher. She only stopped when no men remained, when every volunteer was too drained to continue. Messalina won, and Pliny recorded it not as scandal but as scientific observation. A curiosity of human capacity. He wrote it plainly, as though documenting the mating habits of animals. So we must ask why? Why would an empress, beautiful, wealthy, untouchable, compete with a prostitute? Why turn her body into a spectacle? Why risk everything for something she could have had in private? Some historians believe she was genuinely compulsive. Others argue it was power. In Rome, women held no official authority. No votes, no offices, no property rights. But an empress could manipulate through influence, and Messalina may have discovered she could gain even more through sex. Seducing powerful men gave her leverage. Forcing noblewomen into her schemes gave her blackmail. Making her sexuality so extreme created fear. Uncertainty. No one knew what she might do next. No one dared refuse her. But there's another possibility. Maybe it was all a lie. Maybe her enemies, and she had many, fabricated these stories to destroy her memory. After all, most accounts were written after her death by men with political motives. Roman history is filled with powerful women slandered by male chroniclers. Cleopatra was called a seductress when she was a strategic genius. Agrippina was accused of incest without evidence. So perhaps Messalina was the victim of propaganda. Or perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the fog between legend and fact. Maybe she did take lovers. Maybe the stories were exaggerated. Maybe there's a core of truth buried beneath 2,000 years of embellishment. What we know for certain is how it ended. In 48 AD, Messalina made a fatal mistake. She fell in love. His name was Gaius Silius. Young, handsome, ambitious, a consul, one of Rome's highest offices. Messalina became obsessed, and Silius saw opportunity. If he could marry her, eliminate Claudius, he could seize the empire. They began plotting, but they grew impatient. While Claudius was away on state business, Messalina and Silius did something unthinkable. They married, a public ceremony, witnesses, legally binding under Roman law. This wasn't an affair anymore, this was treason. When Claudius learned the truth, he was shattered. But his advisors and the Praetorian Guard were enraged. This could not stand. Claudius ordered her arrest. Messalina fled to the Gardens of Lucullus, a sprawling estate she had acquired through manipulation and power plays. She knew what was coming. Roman law was merciless. Treason meant death. Bigamy meant execution. She had committed both crimes publicly, witnessed by dozens. There was no escape. Her mother, Domitia Lepida, stayed with her. Begged her to take her own life before the soldiers arrived. It would be dignified. Honorable, a final act of control, but Messalina couldn't do it. She held the dagger to her throat, pressed the point against her skin multiple times, but she couldn't push. Fear paralyzed her. She wanted to live even though life was no longer possible, so she waited. The soldiers came. A tribune of the Praetorian Guard, orders from Claudius. No trial, no defense, no final words. The tribune drew his sword. Domitia Lepida held her daughter as the blade fell. Messalina died there in those gardens, her blood pooling on marble she once walked as empress. She was 28 years old. She had ruled for 7 years. And her children, Britannicus, her son, the boy meant to be emperor, was only 7 when his mother was executed. He never recovered. Claudius remarried quickly to Agrippina, who brought her own son Nero into the family. Agrippina systematically erased Britannicus from succession. When Claudius died, Nero became emperor. Shortly after, Britannicus died suddenly at a dinner party. Poison, most believe. Messalina's daughter Octavia was forced to marry Nero. He tormented her, eventually divorced her on false charges of adultery and had her killed. Both of Messalina's children died young, violently, consumed by the same political machinery their mother once wielded. But Messalina herself, she wasn't forgotten. She became legend. For 2,000 years, poets, painters, sculptors, playwrights, all have been haunted by her. In the Renaissance, she symbolized female excess. In the Victorian era, a cautionary tale of uncontrolled desire. In the 20th century, she appeared in films and novels as the ultimate femme fatale, the woman whose hunger could never be satisfied. The most iconic images show her standing in that brothel doorway or lying spent after the contest with Scylla. These became defining symbols in Western art, shaping how we think about sexuality, power, Rome itself. But modern historians are beginning to question everything. They're examining the sources with skepticism, realizing almost everything written about Messalina came from enemies or second-hand gossip decades after her death. They're noticing patterns, the same accusations recycled against every powerful Roman woman: promiscuity, poisoning, manipulation. Standard slanders used to destroy women who threatened male authority. They're also discovering Messalina was politically active and effective. She influenced appointments, managed patronage, secured positions for allies. She was doing what emperors did, using available power. But because she was a woman, these actions were reframed as sexual manipulation. The story of the 25 men, possibly complete fiction. Pliny wasn't even in Rome when Messalina was alive. He was a young student in northern Italy. He couldn't have witnessed it. He was repeating rumors already circulating years after her death. Juvenal was writing satire decades later, deliberately exaggerating to criticize Roman morals. The brothel story. Perhaps invented by enemies to annihilate her reputation. After all, accusing a Roman woman of prostitution was the ultimate destruction. So maybe Messalina was simply a young woman thrust into power before she was ready, who tried to exert influence in the only ways available to her, and made a catastrophic political miscalculation when she allied with Silius. Maybe the sex stories are exaggerations. Fabrications meant to justify her execution and erase her from history, or maybe some of it was true. Maybe she really did take numerous lovers. Maybe she really did weaponize her sexuality. Maybe she was extraordinarily active by any standard. The truth, we'll never know. The real Messalina is lost. What remains are stories, legends, accusations, and those stories have shaped Western culture for 2 millennia. They've influenced how we perceive female sexuality and power. They've provided endless material for artists. They've become woven into the mythology of Rome. True or not, Messalina became a symbol of unchecked desire, of corruption, of decadence. Her name became synonymous with promiscuity for centuries, calling a woman a Messalina was among the worst insults imaginable. But consider this. Even if some of these stories are true, even if Messalina really did sleep with dozens or hundreds of men, what does that actually reveal? It reveals a world where women had almost no agency except through their sexuality. A society so obsessed with controlling female desire that any woman who appeared to enjoy sex, or use it for her own purposes, was immediately branded deviant and monstrous. It reveals how history is written by the powerful and how women's stories are twisted to serve political agendas. Messalina lived in a world where being empress granted enormous privilege but vanishingly little actual power. She couldn't make laws, couldn't command armies, couldn't even fully control her own wealth. What power did she have? The power to influence her husband, the power to build loyalty networks, and possibly the power of her own body. If she chose to use that power in extreme ways, if the stories are even partially true, can we truly be surprised? She was a young woman thrust into an impossible situation, surrounded by men scheming constantly for dominance, living in perpetual political danger where one wrong alliance meant death. She was trying to survive and thrive in a system designed to crush her. And when she finally overreached, when she believed she could marry Silius and escape consequences, the system destroyed her, swiftly, brutally, then attempted to erase her entirely. The story of Messalina and the 25 men has endured for 2 millennia, told and retold, inspiring art, literature, opera, film. One of ancient Rome's most scandalous legends. But perhaps the real story isn't about sex at all. Perhaps it's about power. About how a young woman tried to carve out influence in a world that denied her any legitimate path to it. About how the men around her, threatened by her reach, destroyed her, then destroyed her memory by transforming her into a monster of insatiable lust. Perhaps the real scandal isn't what Messalina did or didn't do in that brothel. Perhaps the real scandal is how history treated her. How her story was warped and weaponized. How she became a cautionary tale used to terrify women into submission for centuries. We'll never know the real Messalina. The historical record is too corrupted, too distant, too poisoned by politics. But her legend survives. And that legend, whether rooted in truth or propaganda or some dark mixture of both, tells us something vital about Rome, about power, about sexuality, about how we remember and how we forget. This is the story of Messalina, the Roman empress who allegedly slept with 25 men in one night. Whether she actually did, or whether it was a vicious lie spread by those who feared her, we may never know. What we do know is that her story has captivated humanity for 2,000 years. We know she lived in extraordinary times, wielded extraordinary influence, and died an extraordinary death. We know her legend, true or false, has profoundly shaped how Western civilization thinks about women, sex, and power. If this descent into Rome's hidden darkness revealed something you've never seen before, subscribe to Grimoryx. We excavate the scandalous, the suppressed, the stories history tried to bury. More secrets are waiting. More legends demand examination. More truths refuse to stay silent. This is Grimoryx, where we face history's darkest chapters without flinching.